The Netherlands began its war against the ocean over 900 years ago, a country doomed to sink, yet the Netherlands is still standing. The Dutch went from facing floods that wiped out entire cities and caused over 300,000 deaths, to not only regaining miles of land, but making floods a thing of the past. By 2025, the odds of facing floods per year are 1 in 10,000. The Dutch made the impossible. But how? Dutch ancestors built windmills, pre-dikes, and canals at immense human cost. But it was their sacrifice that built the foundations for a game-changing solution. A $70 billion megaproject known as DeltaWorks. An arsenal of giant storm surge barriers, dams, and sluices working along with thousands of reinforced dikes, canals, and pumping stations. The battle to keep the ocean at bay is printed in Dutch history. The art of water management forged their culture. Windmills, tulips, and beautiful canals all over their cities. The Netherlands transformed chaos and death into safety and progress. The result? A $1 trillion economy, ranking as one of the top richest nations in the entire world. This is a Dutch miracle. This is how the Netherlands cheated nature. Let's go back in time to the 10th century. It all started in West Frisia, a region that became part of the country of Holland from the 12th to 16th century and is known today as West Friesland. This region, divided into Frisians, Saxon settlers, monastic elites, and affiliates to the Holy Roman Empire, became the epicenter of early flood control projects. They built the first dikes and drainage ditches here. The funny thing is that these flood defenses were built by accident. Dikes and ditches were made as a measure to turn wet land into arable land and protect new and old agricultural places. But funnily enough, it wasn't to protect their buildings, because they already had terps which had been built as a solution to protect their low-lying areas from flooding back in 500 BC. From the 10th to 12th century, the population exploded and agriculture expanded, so communities joined into the culture of dike building to protect their lands with rudimentary dikes. Later, the first polders appeared, enabling more farmers to feed the growing population. Fast forward a few years, and the year is 1170. Everything was going great, until a tragedy called All Saints' Flood happened, and it was the first of many. These floods were so brutal that they broke the coastal barriers, turning Almere from a freshwater lake into a saltwater shallow bay that later became the Zuiderzee. After this flood, all the regions that are part of today's Netherlands had enough. But before they could fix it, it happened again. In the following decades, the Netherlands were hit by 3 major floods. The St. Nicholas flood in 1196, the first North Sea flood in 1212, and St. Marcellus's flood in 1219. The Dutch lost 100,000 people of their own in 2 decades. The ocean was winning. Holland was clinging to life, and they needed to do something to stop their own citizens' deaths. So a new era of construction and renovations began, building more sophisticated and extensive dike systems. Here they formed the Waterschappen, which is a cooperative water management group between communities, whose purpose is to organize labor for tasks such as dikes and ditch maintenance. But even still, that wasn't enough. In 1287, another catastrophic flood hit, this time even harder and bigger. The St. Lucia flood was an absolute tragedy, wiping out entire regions, taking an estimated death toll between 50,000 and 80,000 lives. The storm had so much power that it transformed geography again, turning lakes Almere and Flevo into the Zuiderzee, a newly formed large inland sea. The creation of the Zuiderzee from the fresh water of both lakes was a gradual process driven by multiple floods. All Saints' Flood began the process by breaching natural land barriers and allowing salt water to begin mixing with the lake's fresh water. But it was the St. Lucia's flood that completed the process by taking over the last remaining barriers and become the large inland sea we know today as the Zuiderzee. This is when the Dutch went all in. After the St. Lucia flood, the Dutch began experimenting with reclaiming land from water by constructing dikes and then draining the waterlogged areas, a process called poldering. Their secret, the Archimedes screw. They used windmills and their rotating axle, which was connected to an Archimedes screw in order to remove water. But despite the innovation, Mother Nature had other plans. In 1421, St. Elizabeth's flood arrived, another unbelievably severe flood. A heavy storm near the North Sea coast broke multiple dikes at the same time, causing villages to be entirely swallowed by the flood, and as usual, thousands of lives were lost to the sea. But this flood was only the precursor of a monster known as St. Felix's Flood, because on November 5th, 1530, a day known as Kwade Zaterdag, or Evil Saturday, large parts of Flanders and Zeeland were entirely wiped out. More than 100,000 people were killed in the Netherlands by the St. Felix's Flood. But if we fast forward a few hundred years, with no major floods similar to that one, the year is now 1953, because this is the year where floods completely vanished from the Netherlands. But victory came with a huge price the Dutch had to pay. The North Sea flood was the last flood in Dutch history, a heavy storm surge that bashed against the Netherlands, Belgium, England, and Scotland. After centuries of improvement, their current flood defenses couldn't hold back such power, allowing the storm surge to break and breach dikes in 150 different locations. The result? 9% of total Dutch farmland flooded, almost 200,000 animals drowned to death, over 47,000 buildings were damaged, while 10,000 of those buildings got completely destroyed, all ending with 1,836 deaths. But this would be the last straw that would force the Dutch to build something truly remarkable: the Delta Works. Before diving into the Delta Works, we need to look at the Zuiderzee Works. In 1920, the Dutch started the Zuiderzee Works, a monumental project to enclose the Zuiderzee with the Afsluitdijk, a massive 32 kilometers long dike. The year is 1932, and the Afsluitdijk was completed. The Zuiderzee is now a fully freshwater lake, and officially is renamed to IJsselmeer. After being artificially drained, 4 new polders were born. This caused a new region to be introduced into the Netherlands, the Flevoland province, which was created through land reclamation. Immediately after the North Sea flood, the Delta Commission was established to advise on future flood protection. Its recommendation was to shorten the coastline by closing off most of the sea arms in the southwest. Based on their timeline, in 1953 the Delta Works began. Unlike the Zuiderzee Works, the aim was not to recover land from the sea, but to protect it from devastating storm surges and floods. The first project of the Delta Works was the Hollandse IJsselkering, a barrier with lowerable steel gates, finishing its construction in 1958, which marked the future of the major flood defense in the world. Now let's talk about the crown of the Delta Works, the Oosterscheldekering. The Dutch needed to close off the Eastern Scheldt, but there was a problem. This project was initially planned as a closed dam, but citizens and organizations wanted to protect the ecology of the Oosterschelde. Public pressure led to the decision to preserve saltwater marine life behind the dam, and so a fully closed dam was not an option. So they built this massive storm surge barrier with 65 movable sluice gates. These gates are normally opened and are only closed when there's a danger of flooding. The second project was the Maeslandkering, or the Maesland Barrier, a storm surge barrier with 2 large gates that can be opened and closed. In an ideal scenario where sea levels stay the same, it would only close these gates once in a decade. Built in 1997, its unique design not only looks futuristic, but it also serves functionality. The Nieuwe Waterweg is the main access to the port of Rotterdam, one of the world's largest and busiest ports. So if the Maesland Barrier became a permanent barrier, it would have blocked all shipping traffic. This is why the Dutch designed the barrier to have movable gates. Under normal conditions, the Nieuwe Waterweg remains open for shipping, and it also allows for easier dry dock inspection, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At the same time, another storm surge barrier was built, the Hattokering, located on the Hatter Canal. It was a conjunction project along with the Maesland Barrier to provide further flood protection from the Europort area. All barriers have a centralized computer system known as BOS in Dutch, and in English, the Decision and Support System, or DSS. The system constantly collects real-time data from a vast network of sensors, including tide gauges, weather stations, and radars. Using this data, The BOS runs complex models to predict future water levels and the severity of potential storm surges. It looks at how a storm is developing and projects its impact on the Dutch coastline. After completing the Delta works, the Western Scheldt is the only major estuary in the Netherlands that remains unprotected by any storm surge barriers. The Netherlands explicitly avoided constructing dams across the Western Scheldt because it's an important shipping route to the second largest and busiest port in Europe. The port of Antwerp is located in Belgium, but its main entrance still relies on waterways controlled by the Dutch. Contrary to popular belief, the majority of Holland is not under sea level right now, or even at sea level. Only 26% of the Netherlands is actually below sea level. To be more specific, the PBL Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency made a correction from one of the previously mentioned studies with the following statement. 55% of the Netherlands is at risk of flooding, 26% of the country is below sea level, and 29% is susceptible to river flooding. This means storm surges and flooding rivers are an active threat for almost 2/3 of the country. To further combat this, in 2002, a new storm surge barrier called Hamspolkering was added into the Delta works. This unique inflatable barrier was designed to protect the surrounding area of the Kampen from high water levels coming from the IJsselmeer. Without the Delta works and their entire system of dams, dikes, and storm surge barriers, a significant part of the Netherlands would have already been flooded, including cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam. There's an old saying that goes, "God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands." Whoever said that was right, because the battle between the Dutch against the ocean forged Dutch culture as we know it today. The art of mastering water is why canals are so common in cities like Amsterdam, Utrecht, and Rotterdam. Also, you can find a unique style of boats known as tjalk, which was specifically designed to fit into these canals. And this combination of canals, windmills, and polders creates the iconic Dutch landscape. Other Dutch icons like tulips, wooden clogs, and even Gouda cheese were influenced by this long war against floods. Wooden clogs were originally created because leather shoes were impractical to wear in muddy, wet, and constantly flooded land, so the clogs were cheap, durable, and water-resistant, which became the perfect solution for Dutch ancestors. The reclaimed land from the ocean is now the home of millions of tulips. This rich soil mixture makes it perfect for them to grow and exports billions of them every year. This soil mixture also allows that lush green pasture. When the cows eat this grass, they produce a high-quality milk, the same milk used to make the famous Gouda cheese. The Delta Works was officially completed in 1997. So there's a question about the future of flood defense in the Netherlands. Is the Delta Works actually finished, or is it expanding? The answer is both. The goal is to ensure everyone is behind a renovated flood defense that guarantees a minimum annual flood protection level of 1 in 100,000 chance of flooding. Looking way ahead to the year 2200, this plan also tackles extreme scenarios, like a 5-meter sea level rise. The Delta Fund already has a budget of over 800 million euros available for the national flood defense upgrades alone. However, there are other specific projects like strengthening the Afsluitdijk and widening rivers to accommodate higher water levels. The Delta Works itself might be finished, but their continuous expansion and upgrades under newer programs will guarantee the protection of Dutch people for the next decades. We should all learn from the resilience and intelligence of Dutch ancestors. If you're from the Netherlands and you're watching this, feel proud for being Dutch. There's boldness and warrior blood running through your veins. So thank you awesome people for watching this video. Stay classy, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.